Good evening, Agile acquisition enthusiasts, and welcome back to the Underground Digital Tiki Bar. It is Friday night, and that means it's time for another episode of Agile Acquisitions and Alcohol. So cheers. On tonight's episode, I want to talk about a question I get asked all the time by industry. Are government acquisitions wired? That's the term. That's their term, not my term. And essentially what it's getting to is, are the acquisitions basically a sham? Is the government going through a process, but they already know which vendor they want to select, and is it worth another company's bid and proposal dollars to invest in trying to win an activity? And if so, how can a company know, or what are the indicators that an acquisition is wired? I will say, speaking from my own experience, I have done a lot of acquisitions, and I have never come across one that was truly wired. That's not to say there wasn't some incumbent preference on the part of the customer, but you have to understand how most government acquisitions work. They're typically involving a lot of different stakeholders, from contracting officers to legal, security, the program manager, absolutely, but subject matter experts. Sometimes, depending on the size, it can go up to review boards, CIO, so on and so forth. All of these different stakeholders have different perspectives. So just because a particular customer may have a preference for a particular vendor, they have very little ability to actually influence it. It's not to say it doesn't happen, but I don't think it happens nearly as often as industry believes it does. If it does happen, how can a company know if it's set up for a particular vendor? The best way to tell if such a thing is the case is to look at a requirement and see if that requirement is written specifically for a vendor's particular circumstance. This takes a little bit of business intelligence, and if you don't have access to it, you really just have no way to know. The most obvious situation of this would be in a commercial software or a hardware situation, where essentially the requirement reads like the back of the box. When I was a contracting officer and I'd get requirements, I would always review the particular requirements and compare it to the available technologies out there and see. And if it kind of had that back of the cereal box sound to it, I would always go back to the customer and say, we need to either write a justification for only one particular brand or make these things this capability or equivalent. But like I said, I rarely believe that it's the case that the government process is out there specifically going through all of that work just to get to one specific vendor. If you believe that you have the skill sets and the capabilities to win an acquisition in a particular area, I believe it's worth the bid and proposal investment to go after that work, because most source selection plans and evaluation criteria are very explicit on how they have to go about evaluating the different vendors. And if you look at that criteria and you think you can win and you actually deliver higher, it doesn't matter who they want to win. They're going to have to justify their decision based on the criteria in the source selection plan. So there you have it. Are acquisitions wired? Maybe in some cases. In most cases, I'd say no. There may be an incumbent preference, but that's just part of the process. If you want to break into any business, you have to overcome that. So, hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and as always, subscribe. And until next week, cheers.